In the previous few episodes of the algorithm whiteboard, we've been talking about the unexpected intent policy. And we explained that it's a policy mechanism that can find these intents that we don't expect during a conversation. What I would like to do in this video is give you a quick demo of how you might be able to use this new policy to find conversations that are worth looking into. In front of me right now is a Visual Studio Code project, and I'm loading up the form bot, which is one of the example bots that you can find in the examples folder on GitHub. It's an assistant meant for demo purposes, and I've not changed it much, but one thing that I have done is I've gone to the config.yaml file and I've configured this unexpected intent policy. Now note that this means that we will have an extra policy that gets trained, and that also means that we now have this action that might trigger, this action unlikely intent. And what I would like to show you is how we might be able to use these action triggers in Rasa X to find conversations that are worth labeling first. We're going to use this as a filtering technique in the hope that we can quickly see examples of conversations where something went wrong. So what I will do now is I'm going to start Rasa X in the terminal below here, and we're going to explore what the assistant can do. And we're also going to try to see when this policy is triggering. I am now inside of Rasa X, and what I have done is I have trained a model beforehand, so that's at the ready. And this model contains the new unexpected intent policy. What I have also done is I have already had a couple of conversations with this assistant, which is why there are all of these things that I can already go ahead and label. But these would just be intents. And intents are fine, but let's instead have a look at conversations that happened in the past. Now, already there's quite a few conversations in here that happened, and I would argue that I'm probably not interested in going through all of them. Instead, what I'll do is I'll filter for a very specific action, namely this action unlikely intent. The idea being that this is the action that's emitted whenever the unexpected intent policy is triggered. So these are likely conversations that deserve my attention. So let's filter on that first. When I turn on the filter, suddenly there's only 2 examples left here. And let's have a look at them. In this first conversation, I'm saying hi there. Then the assistant is saying it's greeting. It's utter greet, we can confirm that. After the greeting, we're listening, and then the user says no, which is something that really comes out of the blue. If you go to the stories.yaml files, you will find no example where the user just says no right after the greeting. And that's why the action unlikely intent here is triggered. And you could argue this is exactly what you want. This is something that we've never seen before, and it's unlike anything in our training data. So this is indeed an example of a conversation that needs to have my attention. This, of course, is a bit of a demonstration of the idea. What we can also now do is look at another conversation that's a little bit longer and more involved. This conversation is longer and has more moving parts, so let's go over the conversation step by step. Again, we start by saying hi, and after that, we get our greeting, and then we are triggering the request restaurant intent. We are quite literally asking about a restaurant that we would like to recommend, so this indeed should trigger a form. That's how the rules and stories are defined. When we scroll down, we can totally confirm that indeed there is a form being activated, and we can also have a look at what's happening here. We are in a form here, and the first slot that has to be filled is the cuisine slot. And the user is replying here by saying, well, I would like to get some Italian food. That's good. The inform intent is triggered and a slot is set, which means that the form can now move on to the next slot. And the next slot is asking about the number of people that we need to book a table for. And here's where something interesting is happening. The user replied by saying, just me. And this got picked up as the intent stop. What the user is trying to communicate here is that there's just one person interested in booking a table, but likely because we don't have enough training data, the intent algorithm is failing here and has picked up the wrong intent. And at this point in time, it will be a good idea to just have a quick look at our stories.yaml file, so we can kind of see what we might expect when we see that happen. If I now have a look at the stories that we have here, it seems like we do have some stories where if the intent stop occurs inside of a form, we actually have an action to follow up on. We ask the user whether or not they're sure and if they want to continue stopping with the form. So in that sense, seeing the intent stop here is not an unexpected intent. But let's now see how this conversation continues. After seeing the intent stop here, the bot is asking, hey, are you sure? Do you want to continue? And then here, the user replies by saying, no, I just wanted to say that it'll just be dinner for me. And again, it's the NLU component that's getting it wrong. It's again picking up the intent to stop, but here's where the unexpected intent policy is detecting something that's unusual. Seeing the intent stop 2 times in a row, that hasn't happened in any of our stories. And just to confirm, I have an intent stop here and an intent stop here, but in all of my stories, that's either followed up with a affirm intent or with a deny intent. I never see 2 stop intents in a row in my training data, and that's the reason why the unexpected intent policy is currently triggering. And this, in practice, is an interesting property of the unexpected intent policy. It could be the case that the moment where it triggers, the conversation took a wrong turn, but it might also be a consequence of something that happened earlier. At any rate, though, this definitely is a conversation that is worth looking into because you can learn a lot of things about how to improve the algorithm. In this case, I would argue that part of the problem lies here. We got to make sure that just me gets picked up as one person as opposed to the intent stop. But having mentioned that, I do want to recognize that this is proving to be an interesting filter. You will be able to find some conversations that are just educational, also from a qualitative angle. I have now removed the filter over here to make one extra point. What I've now done is just giving you a quick demo on how this action can be useful as a filter. What I don't want to do, though, is suggest that just this one action is enough to find all the conversations that are interesting. For example, let's grab this conversation. Here, after triggering the form, the user can say something along the lines of, what cuisine? Well, I don't care, just give me whatever. And whatever is something that, sure, it's picked up as informing, but the assistant doesn't know what to do with it. No slot has been filled here, and this is also a moment where we can definitely improve. Note that the action unlikely intent trigger didn't happen here because, as discussed in the previous video, we are currently inside of a form and we are still being taken care of by the rule policy. Another thing I also want to acknowledge is that it's one thing to detect an issue in the conversation, but it's something else to fix it. One thing that we could do here is we could maybe be explicit when we're asking the question. We can say that we only support a couple of cuisines. Another thing that we could do is we might be able to be more informative in this step. But as you probably notice, if you want to address these conversational issues, some of it is quantitative, as in we might need to have more training data, but conversational design in general is very qualitative. So when you're reviewing these conversations, I do highly recommend trying to imagine what it's like to be the user in this situation and what that user might need. A little bit of empathy really goes a long way here. Having said that, there is one extra thing that you could do from inside of Rasa X to find these examples. Notice how, yes, we are predicting an intent here, but it's not like the confidence is very high. One thing that you can also do as a filter here is you can go to this confidence tab and you can say that you're interested in just seeing examples where the intent confidence was at most 0.6. And then you'll get conversations where, at least somewhere, we were a little bit uncertain about the intent that was being predicted. This can also be a very useful filter to use. Also here, Intent confidence won't be a perfect heuristic either, but it is another heuristic that you might be able to consider. Having said all of this, we are pretty excited about these heuristics that help you label your data. So if you have any feedback on this, we certainly would be all ears. Feel free to let us know if you find this useful or if you have any feedback.